Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeremy Shore, and I'm a consultant for the TIES Teaching Institute for Excellence in STEM, and we're so thrilled to have you with us today. For those of you new to this initiative, the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice, the SLECOP, supported by TIES, which you can find at stemecosystems.org, harnesses the power of business and industry, funders and foundations, K-12 schools, higher education, and more to find solutions to common problems and to build thriving communities. The SLECOP is focused on being an inclusive STEM community that champions access to innovation, opportunity, equity, and lifelong learning. Now, many of you have met Jenny Frank, are still kind of newish. I guess not really anymore, Jenny, huh? You're at the 6-month mark now, or 6-month-old director of the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice. So, Jenny, tell us why we're gathered here today.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you took time out of your schedule today to join us. This is our first session of the STEM Catalyst Bold Insights and Bold Actions webinar series. And this webinar series is about interacting with experts in the field as well as our peers to talk a little bit more about research-based strategies, fantastic programming, STEM initiatives that are driving real change in the field, and making sure that we have opportunities to not only connect with the experts, but to also think about it from an actionable kind of steps way of how we can drive meaningful change using these resources and expertise. So we are incredibly excited today that our first guest speaker, our first expert in the field, is Dr. Holly Miller. And Dr. Holly Miller is the Afterschool and Summer Learning Advisor for the Department of Education, Institute of Education Sciences, out of school time. I will say that it is a mouthful, her title, and I'm not sure how she gets around that every day, but we are so incredibly excited for her to be here today. Dr. Miller's commitment to advancing STEM education is evidenced by her academic achievements, which include a PhD in STEM curriculum and instruction from Texas Tech University and a Bachelor of Science in Psychological Science and Social Work. She also has a master's in teaching from Marian University, and the list goes on, and an MWSW in clinical social work from Boston University. So if there's anybody representing out there, woohoo, that's wonderful. But the reason why we love Dr. Miller is that she is an incredible thought leader and advocate for equity and accessibility in STEM education. She has presented in many state and national conferences, one coming up at the beginning of this next month, the Rural STEM Summit, that's going to be in Tucson, I believe. And she talks a lot about the importance of out of school time learning, integrating STEM, engineering design for K-8, as well as STEM curriculum and instruction for high ability students. She has a unique background and experience in the classroom as a policy advocate. She has research background and just really a key figure in driving meaningful change and empowering all learners in the STEM field. So we feel incredibly fortunate and excited to be able to share some information, some perspective, some expertise from Dr. Holly Miller, whom I will turn it over to and welcome to the stage.
Wow, that was quite an introduction. Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be with you guys today. Like she said, I am the After School and Summer Learning Advisor at the Department of Ed. I am placed at the Institute of Education Sciences, which is the research branch of the Department of Ed, and I work on all things out of school time. So I am in the research field predominantly right now, but my background is in the classroom. So I was a 6th grade integrated STEM teacher for a long time, and I also am a huge proponent of out of school time learning. I was a coach and a director and a camp counselor and all the things. And so I'm just a big fan of everything OST. So I have a lot of information that I want to share with you guys today. And so I'll try to talk quickly through these because I really have more questions than answers for the team. I feel like when we have difficult problems to solve, the more people that are sitting at the table having the discussion, the stronger the solution. So I will really have a lot of things that I'm going to post to you guys and hope that we can have some meaningful discussion about these things while we're in breakout today. So Jenny, can you direct me to my slides and I'll get started?
Sorry, Holly. Well, I'm not totally sure what you're asking. Are you asking how to share them?
Okay, I thought you guys were going to load them, but I will load them, no problem. 1 minute. 1 minute, please.
So while she is doing that very quickly, one of the things that Dr. Miller and I have discussed is the importance of being able to collect stories of successful models of OST partnerships and successful models of programming in the community that really builds an opportunity space for STEM education for learners. So, if you're going through this presentation and anything that Holly is sharing with us today makes you think, whoa, I do that, or I know of a great story to share. We are going to be collecting those stories, and we would love to follow up with you at some later time to really spotlight and highlight those stories. So I thought it was a good opportunity right now just to share that, so that as you're listening to the presentation, you can be thinking, do you have something, a story that you would like to share of a best practice or a really positive experience with after school, out of school time learning STEM?
Okay, so can you see my slides now? We're good to go.
Yep,
Okay,
we got them.
and we're rolling. All right, so we've touched on all these things. I will just add briefly that I also worked in the policy arena. I was an Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellow in the U.S. Senate, and I worked with Senator Rosen's office on STEM education policy. But like I said, my filter is research policy, but it's predominantly as a practitioner. So some of the things that I would like to get to today, just a quick overview of the priorities in education right now, talking about the impact of COVID on education broadly and STEM education specifically. I want to talk about some of the specific benefits of out of school time as it relates to STEM learning, share just a little bit of research, and then also talk about some of the tools and resources that we have available at the Department of Ed. So these are the priorities at Ed right now. We are trying to figure out how best to address the impact of COVID. That is just first and foremost on everybody's list. While we are doing that, we are especially cognizant of the fact that we need to promote equity and student access to resources and opportunities. We are trying to support a diverse and talented educator workforce because that's a real challenge in the field right now. And there's also a strong emphasis on meeting students' social, emotional, in addition to academic needs. Okay, so it's of great interest to me that there is a push at the White House level. The administration has emphasized that we really need to get our students back on track, and they have prioritized 3 specific key areas in order to do that. So the strong focus right now is on chronic absenteeism. And in case you are not aware, I think I read 14.7 million students are classified as being chronically absent, which, as I recall from my classroom days, would be more than 18 days in a year. So a huge percentage of our students checked out during COVID and didn't come back. So it's a concern. Another key issue of emphasis is high dosage tutoring, which we will just touch on briefly, but it's its own animal. So we'll just touch on it, and we'll need to have further discussions about it, I'm sure. And then the part that I work on specifically is summer and after school learning programs. So it's not just Ed. These are directives from the White House saying we need to redouble our efforts in these areas to get our kids where they need to be. So just a very quick note on high dosage tutoring. Like I said, it's kind of an odd Venn diagram when you talk about OST and tutoring. Sometimes there's an overlap, sometimes there's not, but sometimes there's confusion about what we mean by high dosage tutoring. So It has to have several key components. It needs to be one-on-one or small groups, no more than 4 students per tutor. High dosage if it's at least 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes at a time. It needs to happen consistently, no more than 6 students in a group. And in the multitude of links that will be coming your way, I've sent a brief about all things high dosage tutoring. And if you're interested in that topic, I strongly recommend National Student Support Accelerator. They are all things tutoring. So if you have a special interest in that, that's the site that I would direct you to first. So what's the big deal about out of school time anyway? Let's just focus on the formal classroom, you might be thinking. First of all, there is a collective priority on re-engaging our students. Like I said, if they show up, they are disengaged. Something about being isolated for a couple of years and getting intermittent learning and not having social interaction really did a number on all of us and our students especially. Because of that, there is this urgency to accelerate learning while also creating positive social interactions for our kids. There's a lot of community partners that are eager to partner with schools right now because there is a national awareness, I would think at this point, that we're in trouble. Our kids are in trouble and we need to do something. Like the house is burning, let's all come together to figure out solutions. There are evidence-based models and practices that exist about why this is a good thing for kids. And of course, we know there are unprecedented funding resources. I think of the, let's see, there's like $122 billion of rescue plan money for pre-K to 12 education. And I think 20 billion of that was set aside specifically to support out of school time. So money like we've never had before. The condition of ed is no surprise, especially if you are a person who taught during COVID like I did. I was in the classroom when we got shut down and I was trying to continue teaching 60 6th graders, math, science, engineering, and technology in a virtual setting. It was a hot mess. I really did my best, but you know, it was what it was. And so I could have told someone, I could have saved somebody millions of dollars and told you that the scores were going to look just like this. Our scores really bottomed out. Reading, but math especially, that was a real challenge for me to try to teach math virtually. It's really easy to cheat in a virtual environment. Who knew? And so we faced some challenges. And so this is what our scores look like right now, and similar for our 9-year-olds that were tested. So my stump speech, what I walk around evangelizing all the time is that I believe that well-designed, well-executed, evidence-based after-school and summer programs have the potential to help students post-pandemic by providing them with social emotional support, additional learning time, and very favorable conditions for learning and re-engagement. And that is a hill that I will die on. So if you are not especially familiar with all things OST, I just want to highlight a couple of benefits, like what's the big deal about it. And then also I have multiple links, again, for deeper dives into this. But we know that from an academic perspective, you can get about 4 months of student learning added to the academic year if they are consistently engaged in an after-school enrichment program. Summer programs that last at least 5 weeks can add 2 months of learning in math and a month of learning in reading. The participation in after-school programs has been linked to higher attendance, better homework completion, better attitudes about school, higher retention rates, higher test scores. And we also know that after-school environments also produce positive relationships with mentors, which further meets their social emotional needs. There are some STEM specific benefits to out of school time. So when you talk about out of school and summer programs, it can be archery and music and sports. And my focus, just because I used to be a STEM teacher, I tend to hone in on all things STEM and out of school time, although I cover all subjects in the arena. But I have found that there are some special things that happen with STEM in an out of school time situation. Kids have a better tendency to develop perseverance and agency. They have career exposure, which can improve their STEM identity. They gain specific STEM knowledge and skills, and also they just have a joyful learning experience. So I have taught in the formal classroom and in the informal classroom. I believe that there is a secret sauce that is found in out of school time programs with regard to STEM. What I mean by that is when I have taught camp invention, for example, and there are not the same time restraints, there are not the same standardized tests. I don't have a principal hopping in, evaluating my teaching ability. There's just less pressure. And I have found that there's more engagement, more curiosity, more love of learning. And I feel like really, really great things happen for kids when you're in that kind of environment. So just a couple of additional benefits. One of the things that I highlighted is that, for example, project-based learning, which has been strongly encouraged in the formal classroom, there's time constraints. And so if you tell kids, hey, study and ask your own questions, but I need you to be done in the next 35 minutes, it really puts a damper on that creative exploration. And so I love the benefits of hands-on extended learning time. I think what happened was we moved to a situation where we are trying to accelerate learning for math and reading specifically, which I absolutely understand. That's what we are evaluated on. However, I'm concerned that it's to the detriment of science, because that's not the priority and it's not tested in the same way. I personally feel like it's often not valued in the same way. And so STEM opportunities in an out of school time environment, I think, are critical right now. I've written 2 pieces about this specifically. I encourage you to read them. In the first one, I'm talking about just how we have this unprecedented opportunity because of funding and partnerships. And then in the second article, I was writing about that very thing, that I'm worried science will lose its seat at the table. We fought so hard to get it a spot, and now I feel like it's starting to lose its seat at the table. And I think it's incumbent upon us as STEM learning ecosystem leaders to make sure that science maintains its status, maintains its seat at the table. So this is a chance to build some systemic wrongs in education. My personal challenge is building evidence on what works in out of school time. And so I'm telling everybody, hey, out of school and STEM, that's the way to go. And everyone's like, yes, absolutely, we're going to do that. And then I say, hey, and also you need to collect data and conduct research so you can get additional funding in the future. And then people go, no, we can't do that, because there's workforce shortage, because there is limited staff capacity, because we're not trained researchers. Like, the list goes on and on. And so I think that we are asking, the department is saying, hey, build evidence. And I'm saying, I think we need to take a step back. I think we need to build capacity to gather that evidence. I think that's the real challenge right now. We need to be able to share with each other what's already known, including failures. So if you had rescue plan money and you tried this and it was an epic failure, it would be really helpful for other people to know that, so maybe they don't make the same mistakes. I also think that what happens in research needs to be a lot more digestible than it is. No teacher, no camp counselor has the time to read a dense academic article. Give me 5 bullet points, because really, even that's pushing it. So the collection of data is critical. Sharing of stories is critical. Finding the right measurement tools. So like I said, I'm really presenting all the challenges, hoping that we can have a discussion about potential solutions. So what happens is you go to the federal government and you say, hey, I would like some money. And they're like, absolutely, we've got piles of it. How much would you like? Not quite. But what they will say is, tell us what are your evidence-based strategies that prove that what you're asking for money for is actually going to do something, is going to move the needle. And so your program has to align to a logic model. You have to be able to show that somebody did something similar and it works. At the Institute of Education Sciences, we have a clearinghouse, What Works Clearinghouse. So it's all best practices in education. When I search for out of school time best practices, it's not all that it could be. I'll just say it that way. And so there's a challenge. So I'm saying we need to use this to get our kids re-engaged and to help them along academically. Federal funding has to be supported by best practices. There's not enough best practices. So the conundrum continues. If you are in a position to collect data, one of the things that I recommend is that you just start on something very small and specific that meets what your program is supposed to be doing. So measure what you say you're offering. I think that youth perspective is huge right now. Make sure that you have a couple students at the table when you're talking about planning, talking about whether or not it's working. Make sure that everyone is included in those discussions, and also recognize that that's an additional ask for your staff. And so if you can find a way to do a research practice partnership, that would be ideal. And sometimes that's through schools of higher ed, independent research firms, but it's kind of a large ask to just put that on your staff. So ways that ed supports out of school time: rescue plan funding, 21st century community learning centers, a couple of initiatives which you are probably familiar with, but I'll just highlight: You Belong in STEM, raising the bar and engage every student, and like I mentioned earlier, the What Works Clearinghouse. I have resources galore, depending on what you would like to explore further. And I believe that these will be sent out, so more than you could possibly read in a lifetime. But I like sharing resources. So I will stop there. That's fast and furious, but I feel like it's a time to galvanize. And so I'm going to tell you all the things. I'm going to give you all the resources, and then we're going to talk about it and find some solutions together. So I will pause for just a minute.
Well, I got to tell you, I have one favorite thing that you said, because it's something that we talk about all the time in the SLECOP, and it's something that the SLECOP leaders are really great at, which is to talk about our mistakes. We need to make sure that we're sharing those so that we can help the rest of the community avoid those pitfalls. And I think that's really a critical component to any investment in change, is learning how to share those mistakes so that we can, as a community, overcome those mistakes. So Jenny, I know we're about to go into some breakouts. What do we need to know before we go?
Yes, thank you very much. We thought that a breakout session, after hearing a lot of information, was a thoughtful practice that we can share with you, and really just to give ourselves some time to decompress after hearing some of these big takeaways. We've tried our best to capture some quotes from Dr. Miller in the chat. So, thinking about, what did you hear today? What are some things that resonate with you? And like we said earlier, do you have any examples, any experiences with partnering with out of school time program providers and partners? Do you have experiences? Have you been involved in, maybe not necessarily responsible for, but have you been involved in out of school programming, summer programming, after school programming? Are you a partner that provides these kinds of services, looking for partnership opportunities? So those are some of the prompts that we would like you to consider. And one of the things that I'm going to share with you, like I said earlier, is that we want to kind of just do some initial data collection. So I have a form here for you. It's a really simple form: name, email. Tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us about your partnership story. Tell us about your programming story. Tell us about your offering story. And Dr. Miller and I and the rest of the team would like to follow up with you. I think it was a really eye-opening experience, or something that I heard here today. One of my key takeaways is that after school, out of school time, best practices, evidence-based practices are lacking in the clearinghouse, which I used all the time as an educator, especially when I was talking about academic interventions, talking about RTI and how it's going to support students in reading and math. But there's a space here. There's a place here where our voice and our shared experience could really help to advance the field. And I think that that's something we definitely want to leverage as a community of practice to get the word out about all of the incredible things that we are doing. And just like Dr. Miller talked about today, to talk about the impact that it's having on students. I too have been a part of a lot of different opportunities as an educator in a traditional and formal setting, but I also I started my career at the Buffalo Zoo, and after school, out of school, summertime, every time there was a break in school, we offered programming. And I will tell you the biggest takeaway from that experience is I could say without a doubt, the majority, like I'm talking the majority, there were outliers who were engaged, who were joyful, who had hopes, who had plans for tomorrow because they got an opportunity to experience out of school time without the pressures of testing, without the pressures of showing what you know. And can you imagine if we could create more of those opportunities for kids? Not only is it going to build their confidence, but it's going to open their horizons about all of the things that they can do, all of the ways that they can belong. So I hope that that was enough of a preamble to get your creative mind sparking. And we are going to put you into some breakouts, probably 3 to 4 in each breakout. I've shared with you that form. When we come back, we would like for you to share. Tell us some stories and help us to understand what's good, what's not so good. Where do we need to go? If you have questions for Dr. Miller, this would be the time. So, McKenna, I see you have your hand raised. How can we help you before we head off to breakout rooms?
I'm just wondering, you guys are sharing all of these wonderful links. Even I think some of the participants are. Is there a way we can get all of these in the chat, like on like a Google Doc or some sort of like where all of the resources are on one page outside of the Zoom chat?
Yes, as a matter of fact, probably we have that in play. We actually have a webinar summary. It's a takeaway that we will be probably finishing up because we want to make sure that we're capturing some of the, the live time stuff that we're sharing and some of the stories. It will be in a summary document available. All of the resources, every single link that Dr. Miller has shared will be there. And just a reminder that today is not the only time that we have access to Dr. Miller, right? We are pulling her into the community of practice community, and we want to expand this relationship and see how we can work and support each other. So that's something else that I just wanted to make note for everyone. And I would anticipate Monday or Tuesday, you will get a document that talks a little bit. It'll have an executive summary of today's session. It will have some strategies that STEM learning ecosystems and leaders might want to consider. It talks a little bit about equity and excellence, and it also shares some real-time actionable steps that you can take to move forward with accessing these resources, as well as building the field, building the, the STEM continuum for OST in your communities of practice. Lauren, are we all set to move to our breakout rooms?
We are. They are now all open.
Excellent. So we are going to take about 10 minutes. I almost said 15, but we're going to do 10 minutes. Hopefully everybody's feeling good today, and we'll see you on the other side.
All right. Well, I think that most people are here, so I'm going to go ahead and lower that music. Jenny, what's next? So we had some great conversations about the things that Holly was Dr. Miller, was talking about. Where do we take this from here?
Well, I think that, this could be a way that we could maybe catch a little bit of time, but we would love to hear some of the reflections, some of the takeaways from the conversations that you had. So why don't we take those small breakout room conversations and let's start to dialogue in the bigger community here. So does anyone have anything that they want to share?
I kind of do, and it's something that I wanted to, I guess, bring up across the board as we talk about after school programs. I think a lot of the things people think of is, tutoring or summer camps or just extra educational opportunities. And I mean, I would go as far as to consider extracurriculars and out of school activity. And so I do coach esports, which in the state I'm in, Montana, is considered by our Montana High School Association as, I think they made this term up, an emerging sport. So we are in like a trial period. So anyway, what I was getting at though is that the goal at our school is to have 100% of our high school students participate in extracurriculars, whether it be sports or esports, because it improves attendance and GPA in order to maintain that position in those extracurriculars. Specifically, what I like about esports, besides that I'm good at them, is that it shows kids an avenue to careers like product development, to teamwork and communication skills. It just provides a lot of crossover into like the subjects that I teach as well. Along with that, as I know sometimes a lot of robotics extracurriculars are out there. I know our school has gone from having that as an extracurricular to actually an inside class now, but just throwing that out in the mix, that, you know, extracurricular opportunities that revolve around STEM. I don't know why you couldn't have a couple extracurricular opportunities. We have after school programs, and I don't know why we couldn't implement STEM activities or STEM themes to those weeks. I do not participate in the after school program during the school year, just because I coach esports, but I do in the summer. And so I was just throwing that out there as something that I hadn't heard mentioned yet.
And then Jenny, we also have a comment in the chat from Megan who says, we talked about the intersection of OST and K-12 with regard to advocacy within ecosystems to direct integrations between the two in a K-12 schedule.
Andrea.
Yeah, one of the, I was just going to add on that point, one of the challenges is if you're trying to accelerate learning in and out of school program, research shows that it makes sense to be coordinated with what's happening during the school day. And so there are some programs that are really good partners with school districts, and they try to continue what was happening during the school day, and others not so much. So just had to throw that little piece in there.
Andrea.
So I was
Yeah.
just going to add, because Megan and I were in the same group, and we were talking about that. Like, I'm in the Kansas City ecosystem region, and we were talking about how we had to make a very intentional effort to draw OST into the conversation, because everything was centered around K through 12, right? And it had to be, I mean, it was a pushing and pulling people to recognize the value of the OST. And that's where my heart is, because that's been my professional career for many years. But then another gentleman in our group, Reginald, was talking about an area where they have integrated it, where Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they do kind of the formal traditional academic schools, and then they've set aside Tuesdays and Thursdays to be more of that kind of OST time, but during the day. And I would love to know where that was, Reginald. But I think it's interesting because at some point we have to figure out how to make it a part of their regular day, especially if you're talking about equity and inclusion, because so many of our students now have to work after school. They have to do so many other things in that out of school time that it feels like it's going to be to our benefit to figure out how to marry those two better than we have as a society.
That's a really important barrier to address too, right? Is that, you know, students who have to make a choice between earning money, supporting family, looking after siblings, all of the other things that come with, you know, after school in the private or personal household space, that is an incredible barrier for students who need these opportunities the most. So it's definitely something that we have to figure out and talk about, especially if we're talking about increasing awareness and opportunity to help engage kids and get them excited about their futures. Ashley.
Along similar lines, in my breakout room, we shared out just some successes we've had in partnerships within our ecosystem with out of school space. And I shared that at Idaho's first statewide convening, State Department of Ed, Idaho Out of School Network, and some ecosystem partners got together and had seen mobile maker spaces, you know, across the country, but really found a way to bring that to Idaho. And industry partners and the ecosystem have funded 30-something mobile maker spaces across our state. And then in the implementation of those, they're often used within the out-of-school space. And State Department of Ed, our 4-H extension offices, and Idaho Out-of-School Network team up to do training with out-of-school providers to kind of work through some of these best practices. And also when we were talking about making sure that it's an intentional like progression from what they're doing within classrooms into the out-of-school space, having our State Department of Ed on board has been really key to that. And so it's a partnership that I've seen that I think is just really fantastic to bring that all together rather than having these siloed things happening.
Yeah, it's also a very efficient model, right? Because a lot of places struggle a barrier space and resources. Dr. Miller, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to say on that point, when people talk about the value of out of school time, and if anybody in the call needs to ever make the case, I have the things for you. I have the research, I have the data, because sometimes people are like, I know it's good, but I don't know what to give you to prove that it's good. So for example, Makerspace, which I'm a huge fan of, I developed one at my school. People not in the know like us would say, well, that's just tinkering, that's just messing around, and how is that going to get kids math scores? And so we as leaders in the STEM learning ecosystem have to have the resources to come back and say, oh, I understand why you might think that, but here's what the research actually shows. Here's how developing perseverance and agency, and a sense of autonomy, and engaging kids, these things lead to improved engagement in school, which in turn, so we have to be able to have that elevator speech with people, because not everybody understands, not everybody's seen the things that we've seen about how good it is. And then just another thing in that same vein, and then you can tell me to hush, is that remember, it's not just benefits for kids. There are huge benefits for teachers working in STEM in an out of school time space, because there is no pressure. I'm not going to test you. I'm not going to grade you. I'm going to let you get muddy and have a good time. And it does a teacher's heart good to see kids engaged in that way. And so a lot of times that was my sell to admin, that it would really help the teachers as well. It was a special kind of professional development where they could test drive things. And, so we have to make that case, because not everybody understands it the way that we do.
All right, if it's okay, Jennifer, you're going to close us out since we are coming close to time. McKenna, I invite you to add your question or whatever in the chat, and we will definitely make sure that we see it in the chat or we address it with Dr. Miller. Jennifer, go ahead.
Hi, so I have a message to share, and I really want to start off in the right foot when I talk to principals and I tell them I work for a software company and I'm a program manager. I just want to get plugged in and see how I can volunteer and help build programs. And I'm not in sales, and I'm not trying to I want to win people over, and I want to get the buy-in, because what my message is really good. I have a really good message, and I'm just trying to find the stakeholders and the partnerships to build this out, because I know the interest is there in so many different, avenues. So I want to share my presentation. Actually, it's a LinkedIn post, and I have already tried to get a couple of people to connect with on LinkedIn. So please find me. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so very much for your willingness to share today. I told Dr. Miller before we started that we always have an incredibly engaged group of people who attend. If you haven't gotten a chance to go and scroll through the chat, there are some wonderful examples And I am certain that we will be following up with you to learn more. We're going to send out that survey that asks you about sharing success stories with you. But thinking about, today and what we can do next, and the fact that my dog is going to choose this time to bark, and I just gave her a bone. So here's a couple things I want you to think about. Something you can do today, something you can do tomorrow. But for those SLE leaders that are out there, go back, look at your STEM continuum. What are you currently offering? Are there any gaps? Are there any spots where you're really making a difference and providing OST in your STEM community? If you're a partner or you are a STEM learning ecosystem and you're looking for partners, this is an opportunity to make connections. A lot of the times what we see is that it is lack of awareness of all of the amazing things that are out there that is the barrier to moving STEM forward in your communities. And then lastly, I just want to remind you again, we as a community of practice have access to Dr. Miller, and we need to leverage not only her insights and her expertise, but all of the resources that she's shared with us today. So be on the lookout. We'll provide a summary. We're going to try to include these really incredible stories that we've shared, but let's continue to have this conversation. So with that being said, I'm going to put a link in the chat. It is a reflection link about the event here today. It's asking a little bit about the value creation. So it's going to ask you some questions about what you learned today, how you think you might employ those in your current practice. And it's also going to have a question at the end that's going to ask you, do you want a follow-up session? And if you do, that's something that we can definitely plan, probably more informal and more work group related, where we are digging into these barriers, we're solving some of these problems and leveraging all of the expertise that Dr. Miller has to offer. By the way, I didn't ask her yet, but I assume that is something she would love to do. So I just had to have full transparency there.
Absolutely. I am at everyone's service.
Excellent. Is there any last parting feedback or anything you'd like to add, Dr. Miller, before we head out?
Just to continue the conversation. So I presented a lot of challenges that we're all aware of in education right now and in STEM specifically, but let's just continue to have these conversations. There are solutions, there are ways out of the darkness, but we have to talk to each other to make that happen. So share what you know.
Jeremy?
Well, thank you all. And just one last thing from us, and that's to save the date for this year's convening in Chicago. That's October 29th through the 31st. If you've been before, this is the place to be. If you haven't, you're in for a really jam-packed couple of days of learning from your colleagues around the world and having a lot of fun while we're at it. Lauren's putting a link in the chat for that save the date. She's also going to put a link in the chat for the SLE COP newsletter. If you're not already part of that mailing list, make sure you join it. It's where you find out about all sorts of opportunities and grant collaborations and webinars and all sorts of things along those lines. So we hope that you'll sign up for that as well. So thank you, Jenny, for putting this all together, Lauren for running the show and in the background there. And of course, a special thank you to Dr. Holly Miller. I know I've learned a lot today. I hope you all have too. I'm Jeremy Shore, and we will see you all next time.